What's going on there, my friends? It's Rick the Fat Man, and this is your seat at the table. Uh, yeah, it, you know, this particular book in Moria, I believe this is probably my third video on it. I know it was one of my first ones I did, and it was before I had a camera down view set up, and I was basically reading from it bits and kits and bits and pieces and kind of, the talking head scenario. And then I believe that after I figured out the download, I went back and I redid it anyway. And for me, it seems like it's a third installment. For that, I apologize. Of all the MERP campaign books and modules I have, this is one of the ones that I've used the most extensively because of the opportunities and sketch work and information that's in here plays so well in pretty much every fantasy campaign and even some of my science fiction stuff. So I've actually tapped this for Star Wars campaigns on a couple scenarios and things like this because of location and information that's available. The second part was, I don't know about how everybody applies their stuff themselves. For me, certain types of things, when I'm having my morning constitutional, for example, having a book or two nearby helps make things go smoother. So I often keep I currently have a little magazine rack next to our bidet, and in it I have assortment of stuff. Back in the day, I used to just stick them on the back of the toilet. Moria was one that was there often, and oddly enough, the from Star Wars, the Death Star manual was the other one that was there the most often. And I mean, these could be sitting there for months on end, and I would just keep going through them, this picking pages at random, things like that. Yes, I know this might be considered too much information, but hey, I don't give a rat's ass. You can always kick rocks and find somebody else's channel. This is me, and this is how I work. I'm trying to improve as I go, which is hit or miss. That's it. If you see a copy of this and you can get it cheap, and from what I can see on the internet these days, a lot of this stuff is not cheap. Obviously, mine is well used, well worn, has seen loads of I don't want to say abuse, just a lot of use. This is also a first edition print, so I don't know what the value would be to somebody who's collecting things like this, but it is what it is. I bought this in 1984, and I got it from my local game store. Yeah, Frankie, are you coming in? You couldn't just open the door a little bit. You got to open the whole door. Now, you got to push it shut so we can keep the TV in the living room. Come on. Yes. Come on, get your butt out of the way. Yes. Frankie, you're not helping. There you go. She wants to get my chair right as I try to sit down. And once again, try not to keep my personal stuff in here. I'm a little tiffed with the spouse this weekend. She got a bug up her backside. Whenever it's her hobbies and things she wants to do, and she does them all effing day, But when I want to spend a little time to do something on my hobby, somehow I'm insulting or infringing, and that's a crock. Sorry, but everybody should be able to do their stuff as long as it doesn't hurt other people. And she doesn't understand it. That's on her. Anyway, so Moria, the Dwarven city. One of the things that really attracted me to the book as a whole is, first off, it's got a great story behind it. You get a good backstory and history on the dwarves in general, the Durin folk specifically, and Moria, Khazad-dum, the location, how it was founded, how it was exploited, inside the creatures, flora and fauna that you can find in this vast underground city and catacomb. And it is truly a vast place, some 40 miles from east to west, and much more from top to bottom. How its influence in the region has played an important part over the years. The coming of the Balrog, Great Wars, Moria in later years, Thorin II's quest to Erebor, the end of the Third Age. It's all in there. We also have a running timeline of great stuff. Information about the Moria, the Dwarves of Moria themselves, physical characteristics, appearance, manner, a hint on dwarf women, Durin's line in its nutshell, their language, their worship, the folk themselves, hair and dress, lifestyle, Dwarven technology, the smiths, smithing, forging, moldworks, sheetworks, wireworks. One of the things about Peter Jackson's version of The Hobbit, when they go into Erebor and the dwarves obviously go out of the bounds of the actual novel and go into greater depth when they're playing footsie with Smaug, because they never did that in the books, and you know that if you read the books. So the views of the mines and the workshops and the forges, while not exactly spot on from what the beta fanfic version believed and saw, there was a lot of connectable stuff, a lot of things that very well portrayed how the vast forges and technology and the winch lines and the bucket caravan. See, we've even, this stuff actually was thought up in the 80s when they come up with filling the fluff for this. So seeing it in the movie is great. I don't know if their muses tapped into some of this material. I don't know if it was just dumb luck. It makes sense, what have you. But I liked it. I found it believable. I could buy into the way they were the story, the way they were putting it. And there's a reason why the Dwarven technology, the Dwarven crafts, are so heralded as in the world of Middle Earth. It's because they are and were the top industrial people, the top skilled, technologically advanced people of the everyday mundane thing. That's not to say that the elves couldn't surpass them, and often did in many things. It's that the elves' needs and desires and access to quote magic and endless time makes their stuff not as detailed and in depth as what the dwarves would have. They had no need for massive mines with huge conveyor systems and massive forges. They just weren't trying to mass produce material for huge armies. Pretty much every sword manufactured for elvish soldiers is a work of art, and it's something that they have taken centuries to accumulate enough to. And I imagine that after the Fallen, the elves are pretty meticulous about going back and picking up their dead and dealing with however they deal with that. They don't just dissipate and disappear. They do get their physical forms do need to be dealt with, and I'm sure that the elves would recover as much of their weapons and armor and stuff as possible. So I'm just putting that out there, right? We talk about Dwarven warcraft. Pretty detailed Dwarven trade. That's another thing I think that it doesn't get covered in the movies very much, but they do touch on it. It's touched on in the books. Part of the 12 dwarves that went to Erebor included several merchants and tradesmen and craftsmen, not warriors. About half of the party were not everyday warriors and soldiers. They were the other half of the Dwarven community and economy, or representatives of it anyway. So that said, next, elves just don't trade. Elves don't have a reason to have merchant caravans traveling the world. They trade, but on a limited local level. They're looking for trinkets and tchotchkes and really unique things that might tickle their fancy or trip their trigger, but they're not actively trying to sustain themselves. Dwarven merchants, on the other hand, is established to travel a long distance. They often travel so much that several of the major roads in the western half of Middle Earth are actually Dwarven manufacture, are made or maintained and made, not human, not elves, but dwarves. And the others benefit from that. So the great east-west road that runs through the Shire, very few men traveled during the height of the Shire through the Shire's borders, but dwarves were often well known, and as traveling back and forth, merchants and tradesmen and so on and so forth, between their outposts and their established cities and things like this. That what I would make the assumption would carry on all across the Middle Earth. That probably as much as humans trade, and there are human caravans that travel between great cities and kingdoms, just like there's sea transport and sea economy. The dwarves are an active part of that. So the fact that we include a section on that in here, dwarven trade, and the importance of it, has always been an extra bonus for justifying why you might find the odd dwarven so-and-so working a forage in somebody's city, some village somewhere. So then we get the actual structures of the mine itself. So water and sun, how they made use of it, the various minerals that was quite common and rare in and around Moria, which made it such a powerhouse in its heyday. Construction methods, the philosophy behind it, some examples of stonework, architectural themes, and we get into the gates, west gate, east gate, the passages, how depending on the importance of passage, depending on how crude it was. So the more central the passage was, the more heavily it was traveled, the nicer it looked. So the more as you spread out to secondary tunnels and then trinary backwater tunnels and eventually to the mines themselves, it's just function, not appearance. And it's this stuff here that I tapped so much for some of my game campaigns in the past in Star Wars when I needed an underground city or more primitive underground city. This works, right? Works great. Saved me a lot of effort and time, or at least filled me with ideas. So I wasn't. Whenever you're trying to, as you know, if you're a GM, the more you try to do, the more effort it takes, and you want to do as well as you can. So you're still going to put time in. So if your game group meets every week, you better have some hours to spend every week away from the game table to work on the next campaign material and ideas. If you're doing it once a month, still the same scenario. So the time is valuable, especially if you're older and you got a job and a family and everything else you're trying to shuffle and balance. So having the ability to, and I don't want to say cut corners, but to maximize the use of your existing material, it's a good thing. And if nothing else, it helps when you get bogged down into some kind of, you're having a bit of a writer's block, be able to pick up something, looking for a random idea and go, oh, maybe if I do this. Just pointing out why sometimes this stuff works the way it does. So we got, this goes into depth. We got chasm and bridges, the stairways and inclines, how they function, traps, pretty basic, clever, and some basic traps and some clever traps. And I like to cut away the mechanics of a few of these things. And where and why, where they would be placed and why. Then we get the section on the evil inhabitants, the orcs and trolls, the beasts, the Balrog, so on and so forth, Kingdom of the Balrog. Moria's layout and overview of the mines of the city, key locations in Moria, central tiers, the mines, the upper levels, the lower deeps. Then we get into the bigger vast. Just from here to here is roughly 40 miles. So you imagine winding around, there's 1,000 miles of winding passages that you could spend a week traveling. It would take you a couple of days just to travel. It took the party 3 days, better part of 3 days to go from the west gate to the east gate. And they climbed up and down, but they followed pretty much a straight path. So just keep that in mind. It's not something, it's just sheer size. How far can you walk in a day? How far can you walk in a day when you think the whole world around you is going to collapse and kill you or eat you? I'm just saying they kept a pretty good pace. I'm betting they probably would take 4 to 5 days on a casual stroll. Like I said, levels, layers, key locations, central locations. It's just a lot of material and stuff in here that is quite translatable, and if nothing else, enjoyable. So something that goes along with that. When I look and read things like this, and I've read the novels excess of 100 times. There was a time in my youth where I'd read them 3, 4, 5 times a year. I still work at reading them once a year. So I'm 54. I started reading when I was about, seriously reading when I was about 10. So let's just say 44 years. I read the Lord of the Rings close to 100 times, and the Hobbit at least as much. So when I read things like this, and I've gone through this one in depth and studied it, if you want to look at it from that perspective, 20, 30 times easily since I bought it. Maybe less, maybe more. But when we look at flavor, the deeper knowledge allows me to enjoy the movies better. It also lets me yell at the movies for getting off track better. It's the same with the novels. When I read the novels, there's a color. It's the same as a color movie to me. Just saying, right? So, hey, if you can get it, grab it. You can get a PDF of it. I'm sure there's a second edition, better version of it out there too. I have not seen that because I just didn't, at the time that they would transition to second edition and start reissuing basically everything I already bought. It was, well, I'm going to focus more on buying FASA products and things of that nature because I don't own them and I already have a copy of this, even if the newer copies are nicer and have different things. Till next time, this is Rick.